Alice was beginning to get very tired of having nothing to do, when suddenly a white rabbit ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself.
Oh dear, I shall be late.
When she thought it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it all seemed quite natural. But the rabbit actually took out a watch from its waistcoat pocket and looked at it, and hurried on.
I have never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it.
Burning with curiosity, she ran after it, and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole. Down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she was to get out again. Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time to look about her as she went down, and wonder what was going to happen next.
Well, after such a fall as this, I'll think nothing of tumbling downstairs. Why, I wouldn't say anything about it even if I fell off the top of the house.
Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end?
I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time. I must be getting somewhere near the center of the earth. Let me see, that would be 4,000 miles down, I think.
This was not a very good opportunity for showing off her knowledge, as there was no one to listen to her. Still,
yes, that's about the right distance. But then I wonder what latitude or longitude I've got to.
Alice thought those were nice, grand words to say.
I wonder if I'll fall right through the earth. How funny it'll seem to come out among the people that walk with their heads downward. The antipathies, I think.
She was rather glad there was no one listening this time, as it didn't seem at all the right word.
I'll have to ask then.
Down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice soon began talking. Again.
Dinah will miss me very much tonight.
Dinah was the cat.
Oh, Dinah, I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, but you might catch a bat. But do cats eat bats, I wonder?
And here Alice began to get rather sleepy, and went on saying to herself,
Do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats?
And sometimes,
Do bats eat cats?
for you see, as she couldn't answer either question, it didn't much matter which way she put it.
Now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat?
When suddenly, thump, thump. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was a long passage, and the white rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down it. There was not a moment to lose. Away went Alice like the wind, and was just in time to hear it say as it turned a corner.
Oh, my ear and whiskers, how late it's getting!
She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was gone. She found herself in a long, low hall. There were doors all round the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. Suddenly, she came upon a little table with nothing on it except a tiny key. Alice's first thought was that it might belong to one of the doors of the hall, but alas, it would not open any of them. Then she came upon a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little key in the lock, and it fit. Alice opened the door and found that it led into a small passage. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw, but she could not even get her head through the doorway.
And even if my head would go through, it would be of very little use without my shoulders. Oh, how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. I think I could if I only knew how to begin.
For, you see, so many out-of-the-way things had happened lately that Alice had begun to think that very few things indeed were really impossible. There seemed to be no use in waiting by the little door, so she went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate, a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on it.
Which certainly was not here before.
And round the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words, Drink me. It was all very well to say, Drink me. But the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry.
No, I'll look first and see whether it's marked poison or not.
She knew that if you drink too much from a bottle marked poison, it's almost certain to disagree with you, sooner or later. However, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice, she very soon finished it off.
What a curious feeling. I must be shutting up like a telescope.
And so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden. First, however, she waited for a few minutes to see if she was going to shrink any further. She felt a little nervous about this.
For it might end, in my going out altogether, like a candle.
And she tried to imagine what the flame of a candle is like after the candle is blown out. After a while, she decided on going into the garden, but alas for poor Alice, when she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it, and when she had tired herself out with trying, the poor thing sat down and cried.
There's no use in crying like that. I advise you to leave off this minute.
She generally gave herself very good advice, though she very seldom followed it, and sometimes she scolded herself severely.
Well, there's no use now in pretending to be two people. There's hardly enough of me left to make one respectable person.
Soon her eye fell on a little box that was lying under the table.
She opened it and found in it a very small brownie on which the words, "Eat me," were beautifully marked.
Well, I'll eat it, and if it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key. And if it makes me grow smaller, I can creep under the door. So either way, I'll get into the garden, and I don't care which happens.
She ate a little bit,
Which way? Which way?
holding her hand on the top of her head to feel which way it was growing, and she was quite surprised to find that she remained the same size.
To be sure, this generally happens when one eats a brownie.
But Alice had gotten so much in the way of expecting nothing but out-of-the-way things to happen that it seemed quite dull and stupid for life to go on in the common way. So she set to work, and very soon finished off the brownie.
Curiouser and curiouser. Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet!
For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were getting so far off.
Oh, my poor feet. I wonder who will put your shoes and socks on for you now. I won't be able to. I'll be too far off. You must manage the best way you can. But I must be kind to them, or perhaps they won't walk in the way I want to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas.
And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it.
They must go by mail, and how funny it'll seem sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire. The rabbit hole. With Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense I'm talking.
Just then, her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now more than 9 feet high.
And she took the little key and hurried off to the garden door.
Poor Alice. It was as much as she could do, lying down on one side to look through into the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. Then she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance.
Oh, the Duchess, oh, won't she be savage if I kept her waiting?
Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone. So, when the rabbit came near her,
If you please.
the rabbit started violently, dropped the gloves, and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness as hard as he could go. Alice took the fan and gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she kept fanning herself all the time she went on talking.
How queer everything is today. And yesterday, things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me see. Was I the same as when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But the next question is, if I'm not the same, then who in the world am I?
Alice looked down at her feet and was surprised to see that she could see them again.
How can I have done that? I must be growing smaller.
She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that, as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high, and was going on shrinking rapidly. She realized that the cause of this was the fan that she was holding, and dropped it hastily, just in time to avoid shrinking away altogether.
That was a narrow escape.
Alice was frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence.
And now for the garden.
She ran with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before.
And things are worse than ever, for I never was as small as this before. Never! However, everything is queer today.
The white rabbit appeared, looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something.
Oh, the Duchess. Oh, my dear paws. Oh, my furs and whiskers. Oh, she'll get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Oh, where could I have dropped them, I wonder?
Alice guessed that it was looking for the fan and the gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting for them. Everything seemed to have changed, and the great hall, with the table and the little door, had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice.
Why, Marianne, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now!
And Alice was so frightened that she ran off in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made.
He took me for someone else. How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves. That is, if I can find them.
Alice came upon a door. A bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit was engraved upon it. She went in without knocking.
How queer it seems to be doing errands for a rabbit. I suppose Dinah will be sending me on errands next.
Dinah was the cat.
Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for your walk. Coming in a minute, Dinah. Only, I don't think that they'd let Dinah in the house if Dinah began ordering people about like that.
Her eye fell upon a little bottle. There was no label this time with the words "Drink Me," but nevertheless, she uncorked it and put it to her lips.
I know something interesting is sure to happen whenever I eat or drink something, so I'll just see what this bottle does. I hope it'll make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing.
It did so indeed, and much sooner than she had expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling, and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle.
That's quite enough. I hope I won't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out of the door. I do wish I hadn't drunk quite so much.
Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing, and as a last resort, she put one arm out of the window and one foot up the chimney.
Now I can do no more, whatever happens.
Luckily for Alice, the bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of this room again, no wonder she felt unhappy.
And things were much pleasanter at home when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole. And yet, it's rather curious, this sort of life. There ought to be a book written about me.
Mary Jane, fetch me my gloves this moment.
Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. The rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure.
Then I'll go round and get in at the window.
That you won't.
After waiting till she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek,
Ow.
and a fall,
Boom.
and a crash of broken glass.
Crash.
Pat, where are you?
I'm here, digging for apples.
Digging for apples? Here, come and help me out of this.
Crash.
Now, tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?
It's an arm.
An arm, you goose. Whoever saw one that size? It fills the whole window.
Sure it does, but it's an arm.
Well, it's got no business there at any rate. Go and take it away.
I don't like it at all. At all.
Do as I tell you, you coward.
Crash.
I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could.
Where's the other ladder?
I only brought one. Bill's got the other.
Bill, fetch it here.
Here, put them up at this corner.
No, tie them together first.
They don't reach half high enough yet.
Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular.
Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope.
Will the roof bear?
Mind that loose slate.
Oh, it's coming down. Heads up below.
Crash!
Now who did that?
It was Bill, I imagine.
Who's to go down the chimney?
You go.
No, I won't. You do it.
That I won't then.
Bill's gotta go down.
Here, Bill. They say you're to go down the chimney.
Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? They seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't want to be in Bill's place. This fireplace is narrow, but I think I can kick a little.
She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess of what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then,
This is Bill.
she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next.
There goes Bill.
Catch him, you by the hedge.
Hold up his head.
Oh, don't choke him.
How was it?
What happened to you?
Tell us all about it. Well, I hardly know.
That's got to be Bill.
Where's your tail? Are you hurt?
That was awesome.
No more, thank you. I'm better now.
but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I go like a skyrocket.
So you did.
We must burn the house down.
If you do, I'll set Dinah at you.
Dinah was the cat.
I wonder what they'll do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off.
A barrelful will do to begin with.
A barrel full of what?
The next moment, a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face.
I'll put a stop to this. You better not do that again.
Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little gummy bears as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head.
If I eat one of these gummy bears, it's sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose.
So she swallowed one of the gummy bears, and was delighted to find that she began shrinking.
The first thing I've got to do is get back to my regular size, and the second thing is to get into that garden. I think that will be the best plan.
This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once, and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath.
Oh dear, I'd almost forgotten that I've got to grow up again. I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or another, but the question is what?
The question certainly was, what? Alice looked all around her, but did not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look to see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else.
Who are you?
This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation.
I hardly know just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I must have been changed several times since then.
What do you mean by that? Explain yourself.
I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, because I'm not myself, you see.
I don't see.
I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, for I can't quite understand it to myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in one day is very confusing.
It isn't.
Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet, but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know, and then after that into a butterfly, I should think you'll feel a little queer, won't you?
Not a bit.
Well, perhaps your feelings may be different. All I know is it would feel very queer to me.
You. Who are you?
I think you have to tell me who you are first.
Why?
Here was another puzzling question. And as Alice could not think of any good reason, she turned away.
Come back. I have something important to say.
This sounded promising.
Keep your temper.
Is that all?
No. So you think you're changed, do you?
I'm afraid I am. I can't remember things as I used to, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together.
Well, what size do you want to be?
Oh, I'm not particular as to size, only one doesn't like changing so often, you know?
I don't know.
Alice had never been so much contradicted in her life.
Are you content now?
Well, I'd like to be a little larger. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be.
It is a very good height indeed.
The caterpillar was exactly 3 inches high.
But I'm not used to it.
You'll get used to it in time. One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter.
One side of what? The other side of what?
Of the mushroom.
I'm not a serpent. Leave me alone. I'm a...
Well, what are you? I can see you're trying to invent something.
I'm a...
Alice was doubtful as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two.
What does it matter to me who you are?
It matters a good deal to me.
After a while, she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other. and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first.
There's half my plan done. How puzzling all these changes are. I can never be sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder?
Alice was a little startled by seeing a Cheshire cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect.
Cheshire cat? Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
That depends a good deal on where you want to get to.
I don't much care where.
Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go.
So long as I get somewhere.
You're sure to do that, if you only walk long enough.
What sort of people live about here?
In that direction lives a hatter, and in that direction lives a March hare. Visit either if you like. They're both mad.
But I don't want to go among mad people.
You can't help that. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad.
How do you know that I'm mad?
Well, you must be, or you wouldn't have come here.
Alice didn't think that proved it at all.
And how do you know that you're mad?
To begin with, a dog's not mad. You grant that?
I suppose so.
Well, you see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now, I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I am angry. Therefore, I'm mad.
I call it purring, not growling.
Call it what you like. Do you play croquet with the queen today?
I should like it very much, but I haven't been invited yet.
You'll see me there.
Alice was not much surprised at this. She was getting so used to queer things happening. She waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear. And after a minute or two, she walked on in the direction in which the March hare was said to
I've
live.
seen hatters before. The March hare will be much the most interesting, and perhaps as this is May, it won't be raving mad. At least not so mad as it was in March.
Alice looked up and saw the cat again, sitting on a branch of a tree.
I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy.
All right.
The cat vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of its tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it was gone.
Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat? It's the most curious thing I ever saw in all my life.
She had not gone much farther before she came into sight of the March hare. She nibbled some more on the left-hand bit of mushroom and raised herself to about 2 feet high.
Very uncomfortable for the dormouse. Only as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind.
No room.
There's plenty of room.
Have some wine.
I don't see any wine.
There isn't any.
Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it.
It wasn't very civil of you to come in without being invited.
I didn't know it was your table. It's laid for a great many more than
Your
3.
hair wants cutting.
He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech.
You should learn not to make personal remarks. It's very rude.
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is
Why
a
is
raven
a
like a
raven
writing
like a
desk?
writing desk?
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is a
raven like a writing desk?
Writing desk.
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
I believe I can guess that.
Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?
Exactly so.
Then you should say what you mean.
I do. Or at least, I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know.
Not the same thing a bit. You might just as well say I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see.
You might just as well say that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like.
You might just as well say I
breathe
breathe when I sleep is the same thing as
I sleep when I breathe.
It is the same thing with you.
And here the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much.
What day of the month is it?
The 4th.
2 days wrong.
What a funny watch. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is.
Why should it? Does your watch tell you what year it is?
Of course not, but that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together.
Which is just the case with mine.
I don't quite understand you.
The dormouse is asleep again.
Of course. Of course. Just what I was going to remark myself.
Have you guessed the riddle yet?
No, I give up. What's the answer?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Nor I.
I should think you would do something better with the time than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers.
If you knew time as well as I do, you wouldn't talk about wasting it.
I don't know what you mean.
Of course you don't. I dare say you never even spoke to time.
Well, perhaps not, but I know I have to beat time when I learn music.
Ah, that accounts for it. He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you want with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin school. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for dinner.
Ooh, I only wish it was.
That would be grand, certainly, but then I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know?
Not at first, perhaps, but you can keep it to 1:30 for as long as you like.
Is that the way you manage?
Not I. We quarreled last March, just before he went mad. You know, it was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, where I had to sing, "Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at." You know that song, perhaps?
I've heard something like it.
It goes on, you know, in this way. Up above the world you fly like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle.
Twinkle, twinkle, twinkle.
Well,
twinkle.
I'd hardly finished the first verse when the queen jumped up and bawled out, "He's murdering time! Off with his head!"
How savage.
And ever since that, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now.
Is that why so many tea things are put out here?
Yes, it is. It's always tea time, and we have no time to wash the things between whiles.
Then you keep moving around, I suppose.
Exactly so, as the things get used up.
But what happens when you come to the beginning again?
Suppose we change the subject. I'm getting tired of this. I vote that the young lady tells us a story.
I'm afraid I don't know one.
Then
The dormouse shall. Wake up, dormouse.
I wasn't asleep. I heard every word you were saying.
Tell us a story.
Yes, please do.
And be quick about it, or you'll be asleep again before it's done.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well.
What
and
did they live on?
They lived on honey.
Well, they couldn't have done that. You know they'd have been ill.
So they were very ill.
But why did they live at the bottom of a well?
Take some more tea.
I've had nothing yet, so I can't take more.
You mean you can't take less? It's very easy to take more than nothing.
Nobody asked your opinion.
Who's making personal remarks now?
Why did they live at the bottom of a well?
It was a honey well.
There's no such thing.
If you can't be civil, then you better finish the story for yourself.
No, please go on. I won't interrupt again.
So these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw.
What did they draw?
Honey!
I want a clean cup. Let's all move one place on.
But I don't understand. Where did they draw the honey from?
You can draw water out of a water well, so I should think you can draw honey out of a honey well, eh?
But they were in the well.
Of course they were. Well, they were learning to draw. And they drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M.
Why with an M?
Why not?
Alice was silent.
Begins with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon and memory and muchness. You know, you say things are much of a muchness, but did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness?
Really? Now you ask me. I don't think that
Then you shouldn't talk.
This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to get the dormouse into a teapot.
At any rate, I'll never go there again. It was the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life.
Just then, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it.
That's very curious, but then everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in.
And in she went. Once more, she found herself in the long hall and close to the little table.
Now I'll manage better this time.
Alice began by taking the little key and unlocking the door that led into the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this was a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them. And just as she came up to them, she heard one of them say,
"Oh, look out now, 5. Don't go splashing paint over me like that."
I couldn't help it. 7 jogged my elbow.
That's right, 5. Always laying blame on the others.
You'd better not talk. I heard the Queen say only yesterday you deserve to be beheaded.
What for?
That's none of your business, too.
Yes, it is his business, and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cook tulip roots instead of onions.
Well, of all the unjust things.
Would you tell me why you were painting those roses?
Why, you see, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to find out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So, you see, we're trying our best before she comes to...
The Queen! The Queen!
Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the 3 gardeners. She could not remember ever having heard of such a rule at processions.
And besides, what would be the use of a procession if people had all to lie down upon their faces so that they couldn't see it?
So she stood still where she was and waited.
Who is this? Idiot. What's your name?
My name is Alice, so please your majesty.
And who are these?
How should I know? It's no business of mine.
Off with their head!
Nonsense!
Consider, my dear, she is only a child.
Turn them over. Get up. Leave off that. You make me giddy. What have you been doing here? I see. Off with their heads.
You shan't be beheaded.
Are their heads off?
Their heads are gone, if it please your majesty.
That's right. Can you play croquet?
Yes.
Come on then.
It's a very fine day.
Very. Where's the Duchess?
Hush, hush. She's under sentence of execution.
What for?
Did you say, what a pity?
No, I didn't. I said what for.
She boxed the Queen's ears. Oh, hush, the Queen will hear you, you see. She came rather late, and the Queen said...
Places, please.
And people began running about in all directions. However, they got settled down in a minute or two, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. The balls were hedgehogs, the mallets flamingos, and the soldiers had to stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The chief difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo, and when she had gotten its head down and was going to begin, it was very provoking to find that the hedgehog had unrolled itself. And besides all this, the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground. The players all played at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while, and fighting for the hedgehogs. And in a very short time, the Queen was in a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting,
Off with his head, off with their head, off with her head!
What will become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive.
She was looking about for some way of escape when she noticed a curious appearance in the air, and she said to herself,
It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I'll have somebody to talk to.
How are you getting on?
I don't think they play it all fairly, and they all quarrel so dreadfully that one can't hear oneself speak. And they don't have any rules in particular. At least if they do, nobody attends to them. And you've no idea how confusing it is. For instance, there's the arch I've got to go through next, wandering about at the other end of the ground. And I should have croqueted the Queen's hedgehog just now, only it ran away when it saw mine coming.
How do you like the Queen?
Not at all. She's so extremely likely to win that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game.
Who are you talking to?
It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat. Allow me to introduce it.
I don't like the look of it at all. However, it may kiss my hand if it likes.
I'd rather not.
Don't be impertinent. And don't look at me like that.
A cat may look at a king. I read that in a book somewhere, but I can't remember where.
Well, it must be removed. My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed. I'll fetch the executioner myself.
You can't cut off a head unless there is a body to cut it off from. I have never had to do such a thing before, and I'm not going to begin at this time of life.
Anything that has a head can be beheaded, and you shouldn't talk nonsense.
And if something isn't done in less than no time, I'll have everyone executed all around.
You're thinking about something, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what the moral of that is.
Perhaps it hasn't one.
Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it.
The game's going on rather better now.
'Tis so, and the moral of that is, tis love that makes the world go round.
Somebody said that it's done by everybody minding their own business.
I quite agree with you. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be. Or, if you'd like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others, so what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise.
I should think I would understand that better if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it.
That's nothing to what I could say if I chose.
Please don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that.
Thinking again.
I've a right to think.
Just about as much right.
Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm.
A fine day, Your Majesty.
Now, I give you fair warning. Either you or your head must be off, and that in about half no time. Take your choice.
The cat took a choice, and was gone in a moment.
Let's go on with the game.
The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence, and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game. They hurried back to the game. They hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarked that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never let off quarreling with the other players and shouting,
"Off with his head! Off with the head! Off with their heads!"
Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being archers to do this, so that soon there were no archers left, and all the players, except the King, the Queen, and Alice, were in custody and under sentence of execution.
Have you seen the mock turtle yet?
No, I don't even know what a mock turtle is.
Come on then, and he'll tell your sister.
As they walked off together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally,
You are all pardoned.
They very soon came upon 5, lying fast asleep.
Up, lazy thing! And take this young lady to see the mock turtle and to her sister. I must go back and see after some executions I've ordered.
What fun!
What is the fun?
Why she? It's all her imagination. They never execute anybody, you know. Come on.
Everybody says come on here. I never was so ordered about in all my life. Never.
They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely, and as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply.
What is his sorrow?
It's all his imagination. He hasn't got any sorrow, you know. Come on.
So they went up to the mock turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing.
This young person wants to know your history.
I'll tell it. Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word until I've finished.
I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin.
I mean what I say. Come, let's hear some of your adventures.
I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning. But it's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then.
Explain all that.
So, Alice began telling them her adventures from the first time she saw the white rabbit. She was a little nervous about it at first, but she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about the caterpillar. Then the mock turtle drew a long breath.
That's very curious.
It's all about as curious as it can be.
I should like to have it explained. What's the use in repeating all that stuff if you don't explain it as you go on? It's by far the most confusing thing I ever heard.
The trial's beginning. Come on.
What trial is it?
Come on.
The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, and near the king was the white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts on it.
I wish they'd get the trial done and hand round the refreshments.
But there seemed to be no chance of this, so she began looking at everything about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there.
That's the judge, because of his great wig.
The judge, by the way, was the king. He did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming.
And this is the jury box. I suppose we are the jurors?
Silence in the court!
Harold, read the accusation.
The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. The Knave of Hearts, she told them tarts and took them quite away.
Consider your verdict.
Not yet, not yet. There's a great deal to come before that.
Call the first witness.
First witness!
I beg pardon, Your Majesty, for bringing this in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when it was sent for.
You ought to have finished. When did you begin?
14th of March, I think it was.
15th?
16th. Write that down. Take off your hat.
It isn't mine.
Stolen.
I keep them to sell. I've none of my own. I'm a hatter.
Give your evidence and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot.
This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court. But on second thought, she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her.
I wish you wouldn't squeeze so. I can hardly breathe.
I can't help it. I'm growing.
You've no right to grow here.
Don't talk nonsense. You know you're growing too.
Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, not in that ridiculous fashion.
Give your evidence, or I'll have you executed, whether you're nervous or not.
I'm a poor man, Your Majesty, and I hadn't begun my tea not above a week or so. And what with the bread and butter getting so thin and the twinkling of the tea.
The twinkling of the what?
It began with the tea.
Of course, twinkling begins with a T. Do you take me for a dunce? Go on.
I'm a poor man, and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said.
I didn't.
You did.
I deny it.
He denies it. Leave out that part.
Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said. And after that, I cut some more bread and butter.
But what did the Dormouse say?
That I can't remember.
You must remember, or I'll have you executed.
I'm a poor man, Your Majesty.
You're a very poor speaker. If that's all you know about it, you may stand down.
I can't go lower. I'm on the floor as it is.
Then you may sit down.
I'd rather finish my tea.
You may go.
Just take his head off outside.
Call the next witness.
Honey!
Behead that dormouse. Turn that dormouse out of court. Suppress him. Bench him. Off with his whiskers.
Never mind. Call the next witness.
They haven't got much evidence yet.
Alice.
Here.
What do you know of this business?
Nothing.
Nothing whatever?
Nothing whatever.
That's very important.
Unimportant, Your Majesty means, of course.
Unimportant. Of course. I meant important. Unimportant. Unimportant. Important.
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 Unimportant.
Unimportant.
Unimportant. Important.
Important. It doesn't matter a bit.
Silence. Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high must leave the court.
I'm not a mile high.
You are.
Nearly 2 miles high.
Well, I won't go at any rate. Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now.
It's the oldest rule in the book.
Then it ought to be number 1.
Consider your verdict.
Not yet, Your Majesty, please. This paper has just been picked up.
What's in it?
I haven't opened it yet, but it appears to be a letter written to somebody.
It must be that. Unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know.
Who is it
directed to?
Who is it directed
to?
It isn't directed at all. In fact, there's nothing written on the outside. It isn't a letter after all. It's a set of verses.
Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?
Are they in that prisoner's
Are they in the prison?
No, they're not. And that's the queerest thing about it.
He must have imitated somebody else's hand.
Please, Your Majesty, I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end.
If you didn't sign it, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you would have signed your name like an honest man.
It was the first really clever thing the king had said that day.
And that proves his guilt.
It proves nothing of the sort. Why, you don't even know what they're about.
Read them.
Where would you like me to begin, if you please, Your Majesty?
Begin at the beginning, and go on until you come to the end, and then stop.
They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me good character, but said I couldn't swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave them 1, they gave us 2, they gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair. He trusts to you to set us free, exactly as we were. My notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him, ourselves, and it. Don't let him know she likes them best, for this must ever be a secret, kept from all the rest, between yourself and me.
That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet. So now let the jury...
If any one of them can explain it.
She had grown so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him.
I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it.
She doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it.
Atom of meaning in it.
Atom of meaning in it.
If there's no meaning in it, that saves us a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet, I don't know, I seem to see some meaning in them. After all, said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you?
Do I look like it?
All right, so far. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts, you know.
But then it goes on. They all returned from him to you.
Why, there they are! Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit, you never had fits, my dear, I think.
Never.
Then the words don't fit you. It's a pun. Let the jury consider the verdict.
No. Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense. The idea of having the sentence first.
Hold your tongue.
I won't.
Off with their head!
Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards.
At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off. And found herself lying with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Wake up, Alice.
Oh, I've had such a curious dream.
It was a curious dream, certainly, but now it's getting late. So she got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still, just as she left her, leaning her head in her hands, watching the setting sun, and thinking of Alice and all her wonderful adventures, till she too began dreaming. She sat on with closed eyes, half believing herself in Wonderland, though she knew she had but to open them again and all would change to dull reality. And all the other queer noises would change, she knew, to a confused clamor.